Welcome to my overview video of Plotter post-processing. Plotter post-processing is an application I created that is a GUI wrapper around the most helpful vpipe functions that I use quite often, and I have packaged them into what I call apps, which do kind of discrete different things, but kind of help my workflow for prepping my SVG files get ready to plot. But there's also some kind of creative uses that you can use it for as well. And so I'm going to give an overview of how I might create a piece from a couple of different SVGs, and we'll see that all the way through until we actually plot it. So to get started, we are going to go to the place where we checked out the GitHub repository for Plotter post-processing. If you need help accomplishing that, I did make an installation video that will be linked in the description. I'm just going to open up a terminal in this folder, and I'm going to run Python main application.py, and that's going to launch this file picker dialog box. But before we do that, we need to make some files. In my P5.js sketches over here, I have created one file here that will be plotting. I'm just going to save that, as well as just a kind of cutout rectangular shape here that I'm going to use for this as well. So we're going to just save both of those. In here, I'm just going to name this rectangle or rect, and I'm going to name this base for a base design. And so in this file design selector, I'm going to select base. I'm going to open that up. So this is the main window for Plotter post-processing, and this is where you can launch all of the different applications that I've created. You'll see in the terminal window that it prints out what is the currently loaded file or files, because you can load multiple at once for most of these applications. And you can see that it's the base.svg right here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to launch the Decompose app. So let's launch Decompose. This is the Decompose app. And in here, you can remove layers, you can break an existing design into multiple layers, or you can separate layers into separate files. But what we're going to do here is we're going to separate a design into n different layers. Another thing to note here is that any of these blue links will be help links back to the actual vpipe documentation. And vpipe is the backbone of what's actually happening kind of inside this application. So I'm going to separate this into, let's say, 10 layers. We're going to do by distance, and we'll do by 1 inch, and I'm going to split all of them. Let's just click the Show Output button here. That's what this is going to look like now. We've got all of these different layers and colors happening here. What's happening is that we are evaluating this vpipe command string. So this is what's being generated by Plotter post-processing, and then that's being run through vpipe. So when we show it, it not only gives you that output string, but it also saves a version of the file that you're seeing here. If I go to my downloads folder, in the same directory from which you grabbed your design file. So there's this temp folder, and this is the decomposed version that you're seeing here. So the temp folder will automatically be created and destroyed as necessary. So I'm just going to say confirm. Well, I have to exit the viewer first, then confirm. Now you see we have in the folder here this base_DEC for decompose. And one of the magical things about Plotter post-processing is that not only does it create a new file so you can retain your existing ones, but also it takes the newly created file as the input for the next step. So we can then go back into decompose. Now we have 10 color layers. And I'm just going to remove all except for maybe 5 and 9. And let's see what that looks like. Okay. Now these greens are very similar, but they're not actually the same. So those will be discrete color layers. To make that a little less confusing, maybe let's pick a different layer. Much better. Okay. So these are going to be the color layers that I'm going to use for painting underneath the main design. So I'm going to confirm that, and we now have another file in here. I'm going to get rid of this one and rename this one paint layers. Back in the Plotter post-processing app, I'm going to reselect files. I'm going to select both the base and the rectangle. Now I have two files, and what I want to do is I want to combine them into one. And for that, we use the Compose application. Compose can be used for combining things by stacking them on top of each other, or by lining things up in grids. See the Compose video for more information on that. So I'm going to load these in as single layers, and I'm going to change them and overwrite them so that they're different colors. Because right now they're both in black, and these are generated random colors that do not exist in either of the files, and so there's going to be no overlap between them. Lastly, I'm going to uncheck the layout button, and we're just going to show what that output looks like. So we've got the rectangle in pink, and we've got this kind of swirl in kind of a brownish mustard. Let's verify the layer order, though, because that's rather important in this case. So layer 1 is the rectangle, and then layer 2 is this swirl. We want those to be reversed, but that's something we can accomplish in the app here. So I'm going to change order of the rectangle to be 1 and order of the base to be 0. Let's just double check that that's correct. So you can see now that the rectangle is put on top of the other one. And that's going to be important because we're actually going to chop that design using that rectangle as a cutout shape. So we're going to confirm that. And once again, you can see that this has taken on a new name, and that name is rect_c. Now, it took on the name rect because it just picked the first one of these two and added an _c for compose. So I'm going to name this base_c just to make that a little more clear for myself. I'm going to reselect the files so that it gets the base_c, and then we're going to open up something called occult. Now, occult is used for hidden line removal, and what that means is that the chunk that we overlapped with a rectangle is going to get cut out. But actually, we don't just want to cut it out like it's shown here. We want to keep the result. And so if we mark keep the occulted lines, it will save those as a new layer, and again as a random color so that it doesn't overlap with any of the other colors in the existing design. So that's layer 1. Rectangle cutout is layer 2, and layer 3 is the newly created layer of the cutout. We're going to go ahead and confirm that. And then the thing what we want to do next is we actually want to remove the rectangle because I don't want to plot that. I just wanted to use it as a cutout shape. So I'm going to go back to decompose. I just noted that it was in layer 2, but we can double check by clicking show output. There it is. There's no rectangle, and now we just have 2 different color layers here. Okay, perfect. We're going to confirm that. So now we have 2 different files that we care about. We have the paint layers, and we now have the base layer that has been composed, occulted, and decomposed. So next what we're going to do is we're going to load in both the base design and the paint layers, and we're going to batch them up in a process. So I'm going to reselect files. We're going to select these 2. We're going to open those. Occult, process, paint, all of these can do batched operations on multiple files. So it'll rerun the same vpipe commands, but across many files. Makes it really easy to generate a bunch of files and then process them all at once. So I'm going to open up process. And process is where most of the kind of generic plotter post-processing happens. So you can crop, you can scale, you can center things, rotate them, all of the kind of basic cookbook things from vpipe like line merge, line sort, line simplify, reloop, all of those things. And so I'm going to leave most of these things as default. But one thing I am going to do is I'm going to add a bounding box to both of these designs, actually, so that everything kind of scales and aligns correctly, because we had removed the lines from the previous, from the paint layers. So I'm going to add a bounding box, and we are going to lay it out on a letter-sized piece of paper, and then I'm just going to click Show Output. So here's our first file. You can see that the bounding box is here. You can see that this is, for some reason, beyond the edge of the bounding box, and I'm going to have to look into that. But maybe that was off the screen to begin with. I'm not sure. In any case, we're going to leave that as is. Maybe we just won't scale. Let's do that. Much better. Okay. So we're not going to scale. We're going to leave a bounding box, and the bounding box is going to help us align all of our stuff because it's going to center all of the geometry in the same way. So let's go ahead and apply that to all. So now we have two new files with an _p added to the end of it. Now that we have everything laid out and aligned how we want it, I'm actually going to reselect each of these individually and remove the bounding box, since we're not going to be moving them around anymore. So I'm going to take each one, I'm going to show the output, I'm going to figure out which layer is the bounding box. In this case, it's layer 1. We're going to remove layer 1. We're going to confirm that. And we're going to reselect the paint layers _p. We're going to decompose this. We're going to say show output on that as well. Which layer is the bounding box on that? It's also layer 1. Perhaps I could have done those in a batch. I'm not sure. But I'm just going to confirm that we remove layer 1 on both of those. And next what we're going to do is we're going to open up the Paint app. So I have the paint layers already applied here, opened that, and I'm going to open up the Paint application. The Paint application breaks up designs into equally sized chunks based on the split distance command, and then it inserts dipping SVGs so that you can go back and regularly dip something in a paint bucket or ink or whatever it might be, and then continue drawing. So I'm going to change this to be maybe 1/2 inch split distance, and I'm going to make these be circles for the dipping, and I'm going to put them both 8 inches away from the origin in the Y direction and spaced 1 and 3 inches respectively. So these are each representing the two different file colors that we have. If I click show output, we now have two different colors here. We've got the lime green, we've got the kind of gray or black. And if I just simplify this by showing just layer 1, we are going to be drawing these lines and we're going to be dipping over here. So I'm going to need to put a tray over here eventually to actually dip into. But if we look at the pen up trajectories, you can see that we essentially dip, go, draw a line, and then come back and dip again. And that's exactly what we want. I have it spaced such that it will do 1/2 inch of drawing before it goes back and dips. And you can change that value to be kind of whatever you want. It depends on the design. It depends on the ink or paint you're using. So I'm going to try 1/2 inch. We'll see how it turns out. I have no idea. All right. And now that we have done the Paint app, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the latest one here for the paint layers. You see it's got an _paint at the end of it to indicate that it's gone through the Paint application. And then I'm also going to grab the latest of the base one, which has gone through a lot of different applications. This is a bit more of a maximalist approach than you would probably do on a normal plotter post-processing thing, but this is just to kind of give you a whirlwind tour of what you can accomplish here. So I'm going to open up both of those. I'm going to compose them. We're going to just stack them on top of each other. I'm going to take in their existing stroke layers, as well as I'm going to not lay it out because they've already been spaced correctly. So now you can see we have all of these different pieces kind of stacked on top of each other. We've got layer 1 and 2 are the paint layers. Layer 3 and layer 4 are the other layers. So we're going to be using 2 different color paints to do these. And then we're going to be doing fine line on top of those in 2 different colors, one down here and one up here. I'm just going to go ahead and exit out of here. And I'm going to confirm. And so now we have, I'm going to name it final, just so there's no confusion. So we have a lot of, intermediate files that have been created here, but we still also have our original files if we ever wanted to, create something else with those. So next up, I'm going to actually open up Saxi. I'm going to drag over my final design. And you can see this has all 4 layers in it. So I'm going to do the paint layers first, and then I'm going to do the other layers in pen over the top once the paint dries. So I'm going to get that going, and we're going to kind of speed things up so you can see what that looks like. Today we will be plotting with my AxiDraw V3, and we'll be plotting on some Canson Bristol Smooth paper. We will be painting with some watercolor inks. I'm going to be using Ecoline 507 purple and Ecoline 578 blue. When those are dry, well, actually, let me show the paintbrush. I'm going to be using a Transon paintbrush. It's a very small paintbrush, and not only that, see if I can get it anywhere close to focusing on the camera here. Not only that, I've cut it down. The bristles are very short. Hard to see. We'll be dipping in this tray, and we will be plotting over the top of the paint once it's dry using Le Pen fine liners. So I've got a black and I've got an oriental blue. So I'm hoping those all look good together. I'm kind of just picking some colors at random that I think might look good, but who knows? Unsure. And lastly, of course, we've got our guy who's going to be keeping a watch on everything, Leroy. All right, Leroy's my paint, my plotter watcher, as well as the one who holds onto my tape, or perhaps the other way around. His legs don't really keep him up. So I'm going to zip things along as we get started. And here is the final output. So if I were going to do this again, I think I would do a couple things differently. So first of all, there are a number of points in here where the overlap is just, it's too much paint in too dense of an area. And so you get these kind of parts where the page is starting to really kind of break down, get torn up. So I think that a couple different things could be done about this. A less dense design could help. I think dipping less often could help. I think there was plenty of paint on the brush. It was not close to running out at any point. Another interesting thing that happened was that, up here especially, the Oriental blue turned it to almost kind of a greenish color. And you can kind of see it vary as it goes around. And I think that's just because the underlying Ecoline inks weren't 100% dry, or aren't 100%, waterproof when they dry. And so the Oriental blue picked up some other pigments, and it just kind of changed the color. I don't particularly mind that. So I think mostly what I would do is I would make this a little bit less dense, or dip less often, or perhaps a little bit of both. But I'm pretty happy with how this came out. If you end up using plotter post-processing for anything, let me know. Show me what you made. If you want to learn more about any of the other applications that I have kind of created here in Plotter post-processing, I've got videos on each one, so you can do a deep dive on all of them. And if you find this to be useful, consider supporting me over on Patreon. Thank you very much.